Thank you, Patrick. The following demonstration will show the basic functionality of Virtel Web Access. To start, I'm going to show you the Virtel application menu. I'm going to have to sign into it, so I will do so. This will be your normal mainframe user ID and password. This is used to list all of the applications that are available to Virtel as defined by the Virtel System Administrator. And when we talk about applications of Virtel, we're really talking about started tasks on the mainframe, such as the CICS region, TSO, your session manager, and so on. It indicates which of these applications are actually up and running and available by the colored icons over here on the left, where a green icon indicates that the application or started task is in fact available, and the red icon indicates that the started task is not available or hasn't been started yet, and therefore you cannot get to it through Virtel. It can also be used as a replacement for a session manager, and the way that we do that is by simply opening up more tabs And so now we have 3 tabs, each with this application menu on it. And if you want to, in tab 1, go to a CICS, tab 2, go to TSO, and tab 3, maybe start another CICS session, then you can do that. And all of these sessions are available to you at the same time. And you would skip back and forth between each individual tab to go back and forth between the sessions. Okay, if we go back to the actual application menu, we start a 4th tab. I would like to point out that this application menu is in fact optional. You can actually start off from your own session manager or from a CICS, or even, for example, from your VTAM Good Morning screen, of which this is our sample VTAM Good Morning screen, so that your user will not notice any difference in what they see when they enter into mainframe applications, other than the fact that they're coming from a browser instead of from a TN3270 interface. So what I'd like to do now is to start an actual session. And again, I'm just going to go back to a browser and click on the application menu. And again, I'm going to be asked to sign in using my mainframe credentials. And to show you an actual TSO session using Virtel Web Access. This is a TSO sign-on screen, and I'm going to go ahead and sign into TSO using my user ID and password. And what we're seeing here is the actual rendering of the ISPF primary option menu for TSO, just as you would if you were using a TN3270 interface, except that we're now looking at it rendered in a web page using HTML and JavaScript. This is a standard, what's called Mod 2 TN3270 rendering, which is a 24 by 80 lines and columns interface, but there's no reason why you couldn't, for example, use something like a Mod 5 rendering, which is a larger rendering with 133 wide, like this. As you can see here, this is a lot wider and the lines are showing a lot differently. I'm going to go ahead and sign off of this one. But from here, you can use data and hit the Enter key just the way you normally would. You can tab through just the way you normally would, like this, using your tab key. Or you can actually use your PF8 and PF7 keys, or use them from the little keyboard up there, just as you would in a normal 3270 terminal. And if we went down to here and selected a member, that will work equally well. Virtel Web Access comes with a Virtel toolbar, which you can see here at the top of the 3270 rendering. Within this toolbar, there are a number of buttons. There's a keyboard button, which allows you to execute any of the PF or PA keys, the Enter key, Clear key, or Attention key. And this is used, for example, if you forgot what button you have mapped as your Clear key, you can just click on that and clear your screen. There are copy, cut, and paste buttons, which you can use to do copy, cut, and paste of text from one place to another. Or you can simply highlight a piece of text that you want to copy, use Control-C just as you would in any Microsoft application, place your cursor somewhere else, and do a Control-V to do the actual copy. You can do it either way. There's a button to receive from TSO or send to TSO, which allows you to do file transfers. There is a way to capture a screen, which you can then capture into your clipboard, and then to clear the screen buffer. There's a settings dialog, which I'll get back to in a moment. There are buttons to record and play macros, which we will demonstrate later. There's a help button that gives you help for any of the capabilities within Virtel Web Access. And then there's a button that allows you to disconnect the session if you're done and you have an issue with being able to log off of your session for some reason, so that you can terminate the session and therefore the HTTP connection immediately. Back to the settings button. The settings button allows you to do a number of things. It allows you to change, for example, the font that you're using for your text, the font size, where if you don't select a size, we will stretch the display to fit the size of the window that you're trying to put the 3270 rendering in. We have different ways to show the cursor. We can show it as a bar, we can show it as a block, we can show it blinking, we can draw the crosshairs, which I will show you what happens when we do that. We can change the display styles to be a white background, a gray background, a black background, or we can have whatever customized styles that you'd like. For example, we have a customer that is colorblind to red, so we've changed the display style so that red shows up as a different color, and that will appear as a button here as well, and the same for printing styles. There are different types of other things that you can do. There's some miscellaneous things where we can change the way that pasting works, whether we erase to the end of the line or we move the cursor or anything like that, any number of things. We can display URLs as hotspots on the screen so that if you clicked on that hotspot, you would go directly from that screen to a new page with that URL, and then close that page and go back to the 3270 rendering. Or we can actually display the description of those PF keys at the bottom of a page as hotspots, so you can click those and have them behave as if you hit the PF key. We also have capability to map certain keys. This is basically most of what we'll call the 95% of all the keys that you would normally map. It's not quite a complete mapping, but it's close. And we also have the capability to tell you to save any of your settings and to save them to a file on your PC, so that if you ever have to move to a different PC, you can just carry that local file with you and your Virtel Web Access settings are saved. As you can see, upon return from the settings dialog, we now have crosshairs where the cursor is, and if I move the cursor like so, the crosshairs will move with it. And we also have down here highlighted descriptions of the PF keys, so that if I want to cancel out of this edit session, thus removing the copy that I just did, I can click here instead of hitting the F12. And if I go back to that member again, you can see that that text is now gone. So the last thing I would like to show you is how to create and use macros. We can click this button to start recording a macro, and you'll see it starts to flash. And I'm just going to do a series of keys just to describe what a simple macro would look like. We've gone into the list of editable members and then come back to the primary menu. I'm now going to press this again. I'm going to put a macro name in called "This is a test," and I'll do it without the spaces, and save it. And now I'm going to want to play the macro, and here is the macro I'm going to play, and there is "This is a test," and you saw that it flashed quickly, but it did play the macro and came back to the screen where it should have. For your information, macros come in two formats in Virtel. They can either be static macros, which are stored on your PC and are maintainable by the individual person that wrote the macro, or they can be stored on the mainframe and then be managed by the Virtel system administrator. And that method is gaining a lot of acceptance, because that will allow the Virtel system administrator to check macros to make sure that they don't violate security protocols. For example, if people are putting sign-ons within their macros, this could be a very serious breach of security, and the Virtel system administrator might be able to alert the person who created the macro that this is a security breach and get them to change the macro so that the logon is not included. I'm now going to sign off of TSO. This is the standard way people would do it. And we're now out of the TN3270 session and back to the Virtel web page. This concludes my demonstration of Virtel. I'd now like to pass the baton back to Patrick Fournier for the rest of his presentation.